Hello, and welcome audience. We are going to explain a story where you will have a life lesson. The voyeurs are those who snoop or spy on the private lives of others without their consent. However, in the 21st century, the only things that is private in our lives are our close connections or our lives within the four walls. The movie, The Voyeurs, depicts a couple who sneak into a married couple's residence and begin fantasizing about it. What follows is a morality lesson with a few twists and turns to keep the narrative entertaining. Thomas, a background music artist, and his girlfriend, Pippa, a trainee ophthalmologist at L'Optique, move into their dream apartment in Montreal. But, in addition to a cheap location that allows them to imagine having children in 4 years, they also enjoy the view of a fascinating pair. The first is a photographer named Sib, whom Pippa and Thomas portray as a womanizer, and the second is his wife, Julia, who suffers as a result of her husband's adultery. The neighbor lady gets choked in a panic. Since the lady can't see her partner from another room, Thomas is tempted to call 911, but she tells him to go over instead and help her. The lady manages to see her partner from the bedroom door and save herself. The interest in the neighbors keeps building by the day. Pippa notices the lady leaving for a trip as she checks out her husband, who stands half naked by the window. Thomas also tries to work but gets distracted by the buzz of activity in the house across the street. One day Pippa spots a pair of binoculars in a shop and gets some brilliant idea to buy them. This will dial their watchful eyes up a notch. Defense: the neighbors have already given them a full of joy. Binoculars make watching more exciting. When the guy invites a lady who was at the house earlier for a shoot, things get steamy between him and the model. Pippa decides to take advantage of the situation. She hands Thomas the binoculars as she helps him celebrate Palm Sunday. They take turns and their devil's dance turns out to be more rewarding than expected. Thomas and Pippa play along by giving their neighbors fictitious names, such as Margot and Brand, so that they can gossip about this with their acquaintances. However, as their interest grows, Thomas and Pippa direct a laser at their neighbor's flat to record the vibrations of their sound. As a result, to gain a better comprehension of what the pair is discussing. For this reason, they visited that house by masking themselves. The guy wearing a mask comes and takes Pippa to take a photo in another room. As planned, Thomas and Pippa manage to put sound capture in the room. A conscious Thomas understands that things are turning a bit creepy, and thus, they need to halt their actions. But Pippa is addicted to her neighbor's life. Coincidentally, Margot walks into L'Optique, and Pippa helps her to get her vision examined. Through further interaction, Pippa learns that Margot's real name is Julia Novatori, and she is a model who lives with her successful photographer husband, Sebastian Sib Jacobs. Time passes. She continues spying on them and cuddling and watches Sid cheats. Moran tries to play loving boyfriend to Julia. She becomes so involved in this and barely communicates with Thomas anymore. One night she sets up the laser and she puts on the headphones so she doesn't wake up Thomas. Across the way, Pippa tries to connect to Julia's printer via Bluetooth and eventually she finds the right one. Pippa proceeds to type her a message that says Sib is cheating on her, and when Julia reads it she gets a little more concerned on who is sending her these messages. Pippa even tells her where he hid his condom. Soon Thomas wakes up and asks what she's done. He finds out that Pippa has finally told her, and as they watch this, Julia grabs a knife and heads for Sib, who is sleeping in their bed. The next morning, Pippa apologizes to Thomas and promises to stop watching the neighbors. However, they then discover Julia's body in the bathroom after she seemingly slit her on the throat. Thomas blames Pippa for Julia's death, breaks up with her and leaves that night. Pippa spies on CBN. She sees Sib as he walks out of his apartment. Pippa decides to follow him to a nearby pub once. Inside, she grabs a seat far from him and keeps an eye on him from afar. Suddenly his gaze meets hers and he comes over to talk to her and invites her to his apartment and asks her to let him photograph her there, which she accepts. The two of them are headed to his apartment to take a picture. After a while they are having sex. Even after Thomas orders to quit being creepy, discovered Julie is having fun with Sib. As he takes her picture, he asks to pose nude for him, which she agrees to keep, even stripped down to his socks to make her feel more comfortable, which Pippa reciprocates. Sam starts to crack and he tells her that she reminds him of someone. Pippa moves closer to consult him, instead starts to kiss her, and they eventually have sex. Upon returning home, Thomas consumes a drink Pippa left in the refrigerator and pours it into her bird feeder. He notices Pippa having sex with Sib across the street and begins to tear up. The next morning, Pippa wakes up next to Seth. She gets dressed and go back home. When she goes inside the apartment, Pippa finds Thomas dead, having apparently hanged himself. She's lost the love of her life and spends most of her days living in regret. Pippa spots a poster of Sebastian's exhibition. She decides to meet Ari on the same evening, and she tells her the whole story, from the endless spying on the neighbors to sleeping with Sebastian. Pippa feels responsible for Thomas's death, but Ari comforts her. They decided to visit the exhibition. Their exhibition is about the Pippa tragic tale. It turns out Pippa and Thomas moved into the new house, which is owned by Sebastian and Julia, revealing one by one the story of their activities, like started watching their neighbors, knocking on a party, and bugging others' apartments. Sib and Julia have been watching them the whole time since they moved in. Pippa feels hurt and betrayed. She runs off and visits Sib's house. She sees a door in the ceiling. She finds out that on the tip floor lots of their picture is stored, several computer screens, cameras, and binoculars. Pippa destroys all those things. Living in the same house is not an option now, so she moved out. She removes the birdhouse and pours out the juice from there and notices several birds are dead below. Later hung his body from the ceiling to make it appear as if he had committed suicide. The birds who drank the chlorophyll water, on the other hand, established Julia and Sib's wrongdoing. Although the pair rejected the charges, it was too late. Pippa's wine was laced with sleeping pills, which kicked in at just the perfect time. Pippa placed Julia and Sib on the operating table and burned their eyeballs with the help of the equipment. Finally, two boys moved into the apartment next to Julia and Sib's studio. The screen portrayed an elderly Julia and Sib, their eyes burned and vision blurred via their eyes. Pippa was still checking on the neighbor, but she finally left the binoculars on the terrace, implying an end to her fixation and vengeance.